This is the first video in the series from pseudosonic.com for the Korg Kronos music workstation. And if you're watching this video for the first time, it may be just an introductory video to the entire video set that you've purchased from pseudosonic.com, or it could be just a demo video that you're watching maybe just on YouTube or something like that. And in these introductory videos, what I like to do is cover some of the capabilities, kind of give an overview of what the Kronos can do. And then we also may talk a little bit about how it varies from other keyboards, including the Korg M3, which is its predecessor, and then also some of the competing keyboards from other manufacturers, such as the Roland Phantom G or the Motif XS or XF. So to jump right in, when you first boot up the Kronos here, you'll notice that there's something new you hadn't seen on a lot of other workstations. This is a set list, and we'll cover this in more detail and show you how to add things to the set list. But it's kind of thought of as a favorites list for all the modes. So you can set up any of these. You can see the first one here, 0, is a program. Number 18 here is a combi. You can actually add in songs there too. So you can just quickly jump to any one of your favorite combis or programs, or even songs that you've worked on or completed. Say you're playing along with a band or something like that. This is a new feature. You may also seen this in some of the Roland workstations. The next thing over is programs, and we'll talk about programs and combis very much so in depth, and we'll cover editing, through all the different screens and changing sounds and things like that. Programs basically the building blocks for the Kronos. But one reason I wanted to go ahead and show you program mode is that one thing that's changed in the Kronos is that you have so many different sound engines to choose from. And a lot of people may not be too familiar with sound engines. The thing about sound engines or sound capabilities for these workstations is relatively new. I mean, there's been a few that's come out where you can have different ones. That's mostly something you see in software, like in Pro Tools or something, where you may have like a VST plug-in, and it's just a totally different interface. You'll have totally different knobs, and you may even have totally different ways that the actual tone generator is processing the signal from the beginning, and that's where the term sound engine comes from. And the reason that they're different, the reason that all manufacturers don't make them the exact same way, is because that different instruments kind of lend themselves better to have different ways of sound generating. An organ might work out best to have one type of sound generator. Analog synth has probably got a different process that it needs to kind of go through in order to be more realistic and true to the actual instrument. And that's the whole goal here, is to make a workstation sound more like the real instrument that you have dialed in. So the Kronos has achieved this by having, I think it's 9 different sound engines. And we could take a look at these here. The first one's a keyboard, or it's actually a grand piano, and it's in the keyboard category. But if I go ahead and press on this, you can see that there's other categories. There's pianos, organs, brass, woodwind, and so forth. Let me go ahead and cancel out of this. Now I'll pull up the menu here where you can see some of the different sound engines. The first one here is SG1 Premium Piano. If I go ahead and click the drop-down list there, you can see that there's a analog synth. There's also an organ sound engine. The MS-20, which is also, if we click on this and then go back to the play screen, you'll see that the play screen is dramatically changed. And much like a computer application, where anything you see almost you can click on and have an interface with, that's kind of what the Kronos has done with this one as well. And this technology was also introduced in the Korg Oasis, although the Oasis was a little bit pricey. I think it's great to see the technology of the Oasis, or actual computer software and so forth, in a keyboard like the Kronos. So anytime you see like a patch panel, you can actually click on it and it pulls up the patch panel. So you have the ability to actually do routing in cases like this. You can click on it once, then click on it again, and the square starts to blink, and then you can click another thing that you want to link it to, and then you actually get a visual indication of a cable being patched over. And anytime you click on one of these knobs, you can turn the values here just by turning the scroll wheel. It's a really cool interface. So that's one of the main differences, and also one of the main powerful features of the Korg Kronos. Another thing that they've done different in this workstation than a lot of other workstations is that in all modes, including combi, program, and sequence mode, you have the ability to use the Karma feature. And the Karma feature is kind of like a real-time pattern generator, and it doesn't work as program patterns. Nothing's really programmed. It's all parameters that you adjust. So it's really hard to describe, but once you start playing with the sliders, you can set up different scenes. And these scenes allow you to have different parameters or parameter numbers or levels on any of, like, I think it's like 400 controls or something like that. Now, of course, you're not going to access all 400 controls with just this 20 or 30 knobs here. But, you know, the programmers at Korg and also Karma Labs, they've initially set up the controls to have the parameters assigned to the controls that's going to give you the most feedback and desirable things to change. So, for instance, if it's a drum Karma pattern or something like that, you know, you may change the complexity of the instruments that are used. You may change the swing ratio and things like that. But it's really, you can play around with those just on one Karma patch or one Karma pattern. You can get a lot of different type feels and different sounding patches just off of one thing by changing just a handful of parameters, and it's really cool. You can do recording with it and so forth. Kind of give you a little bit more of an overview of what the Kronos can do. You know, you've got program mode, which is your simple, you know, single instruments, and then you also have combi, which is where you can layer up programs or layer up individual instruments. And not only can you set up layers here, you can do splits, you can do layers, you can have different programs. There's up to 16 in here you can use, by the way. You can have different programs assigned to just being played by the Karma generator. So as you're playing your keys, you know, you may have a pattern that's being played by the Karma for the drums or something like that. So you can set up like a quick performance that way. And a lot of the combis are pre-set up with that type parameter. They may, almost all of them, have some type of pattern playing in the background. And you can, of course, can turn these on and off. You can change them and do a write command and save them. It's a really flexible workflow. And then the one thing that makes the Kronos an actual workstation, especially here lately, one thing you're going to see in almost every workstation is a sequencer. And a sequencer is where you do all of your recording. So, you know, if you take a keyboard like this and you say, well, I want to actually make a song, so I would have drum tracks, I would have bass tracks, I would have leads, I would have backup organs, things like that. You would actually compose your song in sequence mode, and if you're coming from a rolling background, it'd be song mode. So you're going to take a look at something like this, and you know, it's lots of controls, but as we dig down into the tutorials, you know, it all makes sense to you, so don't worry about that. But also in sequence mode, you have audio tracking, and a lot of keyboards don't quite have this ability, not to this level, where you have you know, up to 16 audio tracks where you can record from the back panel. You can, you know, change parameters, add effects to those. You can cut, copy, and paste. It's a really cool interface. It's almost just like a dedicated hard disk recorder. So along with sequencing, you also have sampling. Sampling kind of means a lot of different things to different people. You know, a lot of early like R&B songs, rap songs, techno, stuff like that, a lot of it has sampling, you know, where it's vocal shouts or you know, sections of an instrument or some kind of just random sound. But you use sampling really in music production quite a bit. You can use sampling to set up your drum tracks. You know, you can import loops from a CD, you can sample another keyboard, you can sample another groove box, you can even play something on the keyboard and internally sample that, and then go back and, you know, cut it up and rearrange it, and then actually sequence program notes to re-trigger portions of your sample at different times throughout the song. So it's really, really flexible. And Kronos, of course, has the open sampling, and that's where it means you can sample in any mode. You can sample in combi, program, sequence mode. Anything that you hear going into or coming out of the Kronos can be sampled, and that sample can be taken and used in any one of the modes virtually. So you can use it as a section in a song. you could use it as a sound that you play. You could sample someone playing, let's say, a flute, and they're just playing one note. You could set it up to where you're playing back that as your instrument. And of course, you can use that program in a combi. You just set it up as one of the 16 programs inside that combi and use it. So it's really, really flexible. It's really powerful. Another thing that I may have not pointed out is you also have the 8-inch TFT color touch screen in the Korg Kronos, which is really nice. One other new feature I haven't talked about yet is this XY axis controller for it's used as a modulation source. Kind of hadn't really seen that in a lot of keyboards other than the Korg Oasis. You have your main playback modulation, but also for your sound engines, you can use this one as well. So it's a really cool feature. And of course, in the next videos, we're going to start digging down into selecting sounds and also some editing of those sounds, and then of course progress on into the other in-depth sections for program, combi, and sequence and sampling mode throughout the entire rest of the video.